The bunk dropped me on the floor before I even finished climbing into it. Not a slow slide, not a warning creak. Just gone, the latch released, the frame folded, and I was on my back staring at a ceiling made of something that was not metal and was not stone and hummed faintly like it was thinking about something private. I lay there for a moment. Well, I said to no one, that is a thing. Nobody laughed. There were 7 other cadets in Barracks 7, and not one of them had a face built for laughing, or at least not the kind of laughing that involved me. Sarek, the Vreth in the bunk across from mine, gray-plated, and the size of a refrigerator that had been going to the gym, did not look up from whatever he was fastening to his forearm. The 2 Pelari cadets near the window were already asleep, or doing something that looked exactly like sleep and was probably something else entirely. The remaining 4 were various shapes and sizes of alien that I did not yet have names for, and all of them were watching me get up off the floor with the specific expression of people watching something small make a large mistake. My name is Mara Voss. I am 19 years old, from a town in Ohio that you have never heard of and that has 1 diner and a grain elevator, and nothing else worth mentioning. I won a scholarship to the Interstellar Military Academy on Karath Station through a combination of very good test scores and the kind of stubbornness that gets called determination when things work out and stupidity when they do not. I picked myself up off the floor. I found the bunk latch. I studied it for 30 seconds. It was designed for hands with more fingers than mine, or possibly for hands with different fingers than mine, or possibly for something that was not hands at all. I got it on the 4th try. I climbed back in carefully. Barracks 7 was in the lower ring of Karath Station, which meant the gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard. Not punishing, just enough that everything felt like it weighed a little more than it should. My boots felt like boots filled with wet sand. My ration pack, which I had opened during the bunk incident and which had rolled under the Pelari cadet's bed, smelled like something that had been cooked, buried, dug up, and cooked again in a hurry. I ate it anyway. Hunger does not care about smell. The academy orientation had lasted 4 hours and covered approximately 900 things I needed to know and gave me solid information on maybe 40 of them. I knew my barracks assignment. I knew the mess schedule. I knew that the training rotation began at what the station called dawn, which happened on a 26-hour cycle that did not match anything my body had been told to expect. I knew that there were currently 63 cadets enrolled across 12 species, and that by the end of the first month there would be fewer. That part they had said plainly, without softening it. What they had not said plainly, what I had pieced together from the silences between sentences, from the way certain cadets stopped moving when certain words were used, was what the culling actually was. I had assumed exam, written test, physical trial, some combination. It was not an exam. The cadet who told me was a Velthan, tall, copper-skinned, four-armed, with eyes that moved independently and a voice that came out slightly sideways, like sound produced by something not quite built for standard language. Her name was something I could not pronounce yet, so I was calling her Vel in my head, and she seemed to accept this with the patient suffering of someone who had given up on something larger. "The proving chamber," she said. "One cadet, one beast, the beast decides." "Decides what?" "Whether you continue." I thought about this, and if it decides no. Vel's 4 arms did something complicated that I interpreted as a shrug. "You go home, if you can still travel." I looked at my ration pack. I looked at the ceiling. I took a breath through my nose, which was a mistake because of the smell, and then through my mouth, which was better. "What is the beast?" I asked. Vel looked at me for a long time. Not the way you look at someone when you are deciding how much to tell them. The way you look at someone when you are deciding whether it is kind to tell them at all. "You will see," she said, "when it is time." The orientation briefing had mentioned the proving chamber once in passing, using the kind of flat official language that means something is so significant that the people writing the briefing had run out of ways to be honest about it. The war beast of Karath, guardian of the threshold, present at the academy since its founding 400 years ago. Every cadet who wished to remain at the academy faced it. Every species, every rank, no exceptions. I had written this down. I write things down when I want to understand them and cannot yet. Sarek came back from wherever Vreth go in the evenings and sat on his bunk and looked at me with the particular expression of someone who has decided to say something and is still working out the how of it. "You are the human," he said. "It was not a question." "I am. From the third planet, the wet one. We call it Earth, but yes." He was quiet for a moment. His plating made a sound when he shifted, low and rhythmic, like something settling. "The beast has never bowed," he said. "Not once, in 400 years of cullings." I looked at him. "Okay. You understand what I am telling you. You are telling me the beast does not lose." "I am telling you," Sarek said, "that it does not acknowledge, it does not recognize. It has sent home Vreth soldiers who had already survived 3 wars. It has ended the academy careers of Pelari cadets who could lift 4 times their body weight." He paused. "It will not care that you are small." I thought about my father, the mine, the way he had looked at me the morning of the accident before he knew it was going to be the accident, and said the only thing he ever said that mattered. I did not say it out loud. I did not need to. "I know," I said to Sarek, "it will not care about a lot of things." He stared at me. Something moved behind his eyes that I did not have a name for yet. His plating clicked once, soft, like something uncertain. "You smiled," he said, "when I told you." "Did I?" "In the corridor, after the briefing, when I said it had never bowed, you smiled." I thought about this honestly. I did not know I did that. Sarek was quiet for a long time. Then he said, very carefully as if the words were something fragile, "That is the thing that frightened me." The lights in Barracks 7 went to half cycle. One by one, the other cadets settled into whatever sleep looked like for them. The station hummed. Somewhere above us, in the deep structure of Karath, something moved that was large enough to feel through the floor if you were paying attention. I was paying attention. I lay on my bunk, latched properly now. I had checked 3 times, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about 400 years, and about the word never, and about how the only reason a word like never gets used is because nobody has yet found the reason it should not be. I was going to find the reason. Not because I was brave. I want to be clear about that. Because I was from Ohio, and in Ohio, when something needs doing, you figure out how it gets done and you do it, and you do not make a big thing about it afterward. I closed my eyes. The station hummed. I slept. The cullings started on the 5th day. Not all at once. 1 per rotation, sometimes 2. The academy ran them quiet, no announcement, no ceremony. You were simply told the evening before that your name was on the schedule. You went in the morning. You came back or you did not come back, and either way the rest of us were at breakfast by the time it was over, eating whatever the mess served that tasted roughly like food and not talking about it. I kept a list. I am a list person. My father was a list person. In the mine, before a new shaft was opened, he made lists, everything that could go wrong, everything that would need checking, everything that had gone wrong before and would probably go wrong again. He said a list was just fear with a job to do. I thought that was one of the smarter things he ever said, and he said a lot of smart things, so that was not a low bar. My list had a column for species, a column for what I observed before the cadet went in, a column for what I observed after they came out, and a column I labeled simply Notes. Day 5. Pelari Cadet, the one who slept near the window, who I had learned was named something with 4 syllables that I rendered as Pel in my notes. Strong, compact, moved like everything was a controlled fall, went in at first light. Came back 2 hours later walking on her own, which I marked as significant because not all of them did. Her 4 eyes were open and steady, and looking at something that was not in the room. She sat down, she did not eat, she did not speak for 6 hours. I put that in the notes column. Day 6. 2 Velthan cadets, scheduled together, which was the only paired culling I saw. They were brothers, or the Velthan equivalent, which I gathered from the way they moved around each other, always aware, always slightly angled in, like plants growing toward the same light. They went in together. One came back alone and walked directly to his bunk and lay face down and did not move until the following morning. Nobody asked. That was the thing I noticed. Nobody in the barracks asked what happened to the other one. The silence around the empty bunk was so careful it had edges. Day 8. A Gret cadet from Barracks 3, I had seen him in the mess, enormous even by Gret standards, built like a wall that had decided to pursue a military career. The kind of size that makes you recalibrate your understanding of what a living thing can be. He went in. He came back. He was walking and he was intact, and he sat at the far end of the mess table and stared at his food and did not touch it. I sat across from him, which surprised him. I think I was the last person he expected. "Did you win?" I asked. He looked at me for a long time. "That is not the right question," he said. His standard was slow and careful, like someone placing heavy objects down gently. "What is the right question?" "Whether it let you leave," he said. "That is all it ever is, whether it lets you leave." I put that in the notes column. Sorek's culling was on day 11. I did not watch him go in. We did not have that kind of arrangement yet, whatever kind of arrangement it was. But I was awake when he left at first light, and I was awake when he came back, and I watched him from my bunk with my notebook open and my pen still, not writing anything. He was intact, every plate in place. He sat on his bunk across from mine, and he did not move, and he did not speak, and the light went through a full half cycle, and he still did not move. I got up. I had one ration pack left from my personal supply, the ones from home, not the station-issue ones. My aunt had packed them. They smelled like coffee and something sweet, and nothing like what you would eat in space, which was precisely why I had been saving them. I made the coffee. It was bad. The station water was slightly wrong and the heating element in my kit ran hot, and the result was something that tasted like coffee's intentions rather than coffee itself. I poured 2 cups. I put one on the shelf between our bunks. Sorek looked at it for a long time. He picked it up, he drank it. He did not say anything. I did not say anything. The station hummed. That was the whole scene, and I knew even then that it was the most important one in my time at Karath so far. I was now the last cadet in Barracks 7, without a culling date. I had assumed this was an accident of scheduling. Then Vel told me over mess, very gently, that the human had been placed last deliberately, not out of mercy. "Why?" I asked. "Because they want to see," she said, "if the others survive first. If none of them do, there is no point scheduling the human at all." I chewed my food. It tasted like warm cardboard with ambitions. "That is actually logical," I said. Vel looked at me the way she had on day 1, that particular look. "You are a very strange person," she said. "I am from Ohio." "I do not know what that means." "It means that strange is relative," I said, "and most things make sense if you look at them long enough." I had been looking at everything long enough. The notes column was getting full. The pattern I had found was not in the survivors. It was in the first move. Every account, every cadet who would talk, every piece of behavior I had recorded, the beast always moved first the same way. It came straight at you. Full speed. No angle, no feint, no tactical adjustment. It hit you like a question, not a weapon. And what it was asking, this was the thing I could not prove yet, only feel, was not "can you survive this?" It was something else, something quieter. I wrote a single word in the notes column and drew a circle around it. I did not show it to anyone. On the evening of day 14, my culling date arrived on the station board. 14 days away. I looked at it for the length of time it took me to finish my ration pack, which was approximately 4 minutes, and then I went back to Barracks 7 and sat on my bunk and opened my notebook. I picked up my pen. I wrote a single word on my palm, in the space between my thumb and wrist where it would not smear when I gripped things. I pressed the pen down hard so it would last. "Steady." I put the notebook away. I lay down, the station hummed. 14 days. I started planning. The archive was not locked exactly. It was access restricted, which is a different thing, and the difference is this. A lock is a wall, and a wall you either break through or you do not. An access restriction is a door that requires a key, and a key is just information. And information is something you find if you are patient and willing to spend 3 evenings in the station's lower maintenance corridor, where the archive terminal runs on a secondary network that does not log the same way the main system does. My father would have called this being resourceful. The academy would have called it something less flattering. I had 14 days, and what I needed was in that archive. And so there I was at the second night of third rotation, sitting on a cold floor with my back against a humming wall, reading everything the Cadet Academy had ever recorded about the war beast. There was a lot. 400 years of documentation will fill a significant amount of space. I started at the beginning, because I am a beginning first person, and because patterns are easier to see when you know their origin. The beast was not from Cadet. This was the first thing. I had assumed it was native, something the Academy founders had found on the station, incorporated, made into a tradition. That was wrong. The beast had been brought here, transferred, the oldest records said, from a holding facility operated by an empire that no longer existed, a civilization that had collapsed roughly 430 years ago under the weight of a war it had started and could not finish. The Varath Empire, gone now. Every station, every colony, every fleet. In 50 years they had built the largest military presence in this sector of the galaxy. In 30 years after that, they were dust. I read about them for an hour. They were, by every account, extraordinarily good at conquest and extraordinarily bad at everything else. They bred weapons. They engineered aggression. They built things designed to survive everything and feel nothing and stop only when there was nothing left to stop for. The beast was one of those things. Except, I kept reading. There were accounts from Varath soldiers, fragments, captured records, things preserved more by accident than intention. Most of them described the beast in combat terms: size, speed, damage output, threat level. Standard military documentation. But there were 3 accounts, all from a single decade near the end of the Empire, that used a different kind of language. The first said, "It has not eaten in 6 cycles. It stands in the eastern chamber and does not move. The handlers do not know why." The second said, "The new intake of soldiers refuses to enter the beast's chamber. They say it watches them, not the way a predator watches. The way and here the translation got uncertain, the word catching on something I did not have a clear equivalent for in standard. The closest I could render it was, the way a question watches an answer it does not know yet." The third account was the one that made me sit still for a long time. It said, "Today it did not attack. The soldier entered. The soldier stood. The beast circled 3 times and then lowered its head and held that position until the soldier left. We have no record of this behavior. The commanding officer has ordered the account sealed. I am writing it here because I believe it is the most important thing I have ever seen, and I do not want it to disappear." That account was dated 431 years ago, 3 years before the Varath Empire ended. The commanding officer had ordered it sealed. The Cadet Academy had filed it under anomalous and moved on. I read it 4 times. Then I started looking for the footnote I had noticed in the preliminary index. Just a reference, just a number. Filed under post-transfer behavioral records. And it took me another hour to find, because it was buried under 17 layers of cross-referencing that seemed almost designed to be inconvenient. 70 years ago, a cadet, species unrecorded, which was itself unusual, the Academy recorded species on everything. The culling had lasted 4 hours, which was far longer than any other on record. The beast had not attacked. The cadet had emerged without injury. The beast had been observed through the chamber's external sensors in a posture that the recording officer had described with careful academic language as inconsistent with standard threat display, possibly analogous to submission. Flagged for review. The review had never happened, or if it had, its findings were not in any file I could reach. The cadet's name was not recorded either, Just human, cadet female. I sat with that for a long time. The station hummed around me. Somewhere above, in the deep weight of Karath's structure, I could feel, very faintly, if I pressed my back flat against the wall and held still, something that was not mechanical. Something that moved on its own rhythm. Something large and slow and alive. The beast's chamber was 3 levels up and half a rotation around the ring. I had known this since day 2. I had not let myself think about it directly. Now I did. I thought about what the Vareth had built it for. I thought about what 400 years in a station had done to something built for conquest. I thought about the soldier who had stood still, and the beast that had lowered its head, and the officer who had tried to make that disappear. I thought about the word I had written on my palm. I pulled out my notebook. I wrote at the top of a clean page, what is it actually testing for? Below it I wrote strength no, aggression no, combat skill no. I sat with the pen above the paper for a long time. Then I wrote one more word, and I did not circle it this time because it did not need a circle. It stood on its own. I heard a sound in the corridor behind me. I did not startle, which I was quietly proud of. Sarek stood in the maintenance corridor entrance with his arms at his sides and the particular expression of someone who had been looking for me and had not planned what to say when he found me. He looked at the archive terminal. He looked at me. He looked at the pile of translated records around me on the floor. "You have been here for 4 hours," he said. "I know. The floor is cold. I know that too." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his equipment vest and placed a second ration pack on the floor beside me, the coffee kind. He had remembered. He turned and walked back down the corridor without another word. I stared at the ration pack for a moment. I picked it up. I went back to reading. An hour later I found one more fragment, barely a paragraph, from a Vareth behavioral researcher whose name had been almost entirely corrupted in the data transfer, just a first initial remaining. The fragment said, "The subject does not respond to dominance. We have known this. What we have failed to ask is what it does respond to." My theory, which I record here without expectation that it will be accepted, is that the subject was built for war, but was not given the one thing that war requires to mean something. My theory is that it has been looking for that thing ever since. The researcher had not written what the thing was. I did not need them to. I closed the archive. I gathered my notes. I stood up, and my back was stiff from the cold floor, and I stretched until something cracked in a way that felt like relief. I looked at my palm. The word was still there, faded a little now, smudged at the edge where I had been pressing my hand against the floor. Steady. 10 days left. I walked back to Barracks 7 through corridors that hummed and breathed and carried. If you were paying attention, if you pressed your feet flat and felt rather than heard, a rhythm that was not the station's. I went to sleep. I was ready to begin. 10 days goes fast when you have a plan. It goes faster when you are spending those days convincing every part of your body and brain to cooperate with a plan that every reasonable instinct you own is loudly opposed to. I ran the corridors every morning before first rotation, which the other cadets observed with the kind of patient puzzlement you give to something small doing something unnecessary. I ate everything I was served regardless of smell or texture, because I needed the fuel, because in my experience the body will do what you ask it if you have been honest with it about what is coming. I slept on schedule. I kept my notes. I drank the bad coffee and made some for Sarek when I had the supply, and he drank it without comment, which I had come to understand was his version of warmth. On the last evening, Vel found me sitting outside Barracks 7 in the corridor with my back against the wall, and my knees pulled up. She sat beside me. She did not ask anything. That was why I talked. "The Velthan soldier," I said, "from your records, the one who stood in the chamber for an hour before the beast moved at all. What was he doing?" Vel was quiet for a moment. "Praying," she said. "I thought about that. Did it work?" "He survived." She paused. "He also did not return to the academy, He said he understood something in there that made everything afterward feel like a smaller thing. He went back to his home world and grew food. That sounds like it worked to me. Vel made a sound that was her version of a laugh, low and sideways. You are very unusual, Mara Voss. I am from Ohio. You keep saying that. It keeps being relevant. She stood. She put a hand on my shoulder, brief, careful, the gesture of someone who was not entirely sure how humans received contact. I will be at the observation port, she said, when it is your turn. I nodded. She left. I sat for a while longer. I looked at my palm. The word was almost gone. I had been in the station 24 days, and the marker had faded to a shadow of itself, just the ghost of letters if you knew what to look for. I did not rewrite it. I went to sleep. In the morning, I went to the proving chamber. The walk took 7 minutes. I know because I counted, not because I was nervous, but because counting is a thing your brain does when it needs something to hold onto. The corridors were empty at first light. The academy ran quiet in the early rotation, most species still in their equivalent of sleep. My boots were loud on the floor. My breath was visible in the cold air near the lower ring. The chamber door was a single slab of something that looked like dark stone and was not stone, set into the wall with no visible hinge or mechanism. There was a panel beside it. I pressed my palm to it. It read my print. The door moved back into the side with a sound like something very old being asked to move one more time. I went in. The chamber was larger than I had pictured. I had pictured a room. This was closer to a landscape, a vast, dark, vaulted space that rose overhead into shadow, with a floor of rough-cut material that caught the low amber light and gave nothing back. The air was different inside, warmer, heavier. It had a smell that I did not have a category for, something between rain on dry earth and the inside of a room where something large had been sleeping. The door closed behind me. I stood still, I breathed, I let my eyes adjust. For a long moment there was nothing, just the chamber and the amber light and the sound of my own breathing. Then from the far dark, something moved. I had read every description in the archive. I want to be clear that none of them were adequate. Not because the descriptions were wrong, they were accurate as far as facts go, but because facts do not prepare you for the way something truly large moves when it is moving toward you. There is a particular kind of slow in it. Not hesitation, not calculation. The slow of something that has never had a reason to hurry, because hurrying implies the possibility of missing. The beast was roughly the shape of something built for the ground, 4 limbs. A long body, a head that sat forward and low, carried with the kind of deliberate weight that meant the head itself was a statement. Its surface was the color of deep water at night. Not quite black, not quite blue, with something underneath that shifted when the light caught it. Its eyes were set wide and they were pale, almost white, with a pupil that caught the amber light and held it. It was enormous. Not in the way the Great Cadet had been enormous. That was size measured in familiar terms. Big as a thing could be while still being a version of something you recognized. The beast was enormous in a way that stepped outside the scale you usually moved through. Looking at it was like looking at weather. It stopped. It was perhaps 40 feet away. It stood and it looked at me and I stood and I looked at it, and for a moment that was everything there was in the chamber. Then it charged. No warning, no wind up, there and then moving. 40 feet became 20, 20 became 10. I did not move. Not because I had no instincts. Lord have mercy, every instinct I owned was filing an immediate and unanimous objection. My heart hit my ribs like it was trying to leave. Every muscle in my back and legs was ready, coiled, waiting for the signal to go. My body had a plan, and the plan was run, and the plan was very loud. I did not move. The beast pulled up at the last second. A controlled stop, incredibly, the way a wave pulls back from a shore at the last breath. It was close enough that I could feel the air it displaced. Close enough that I could see the individual textures in its surface, and the way its breath came out in a slow, visible curl in the cold air. It looked at me. I looked at it. My shoulder was burning. In the stop it had clipped me, not with intent, I thought, more like the edge of a thing passing, and the impact had gone straight through to the bone. I filed the pain the way my father had taught me to file pain. Real, present, not in charge. The beast stepped back, its head tilted slowly to one side. In the archive I had read that tilting behavior. I had marked it. I had circled it twice. It was the same posture as 431 years ago. The same as the unnamed researcher's fragment. The same as the sealed Varath record. It was not a threat display. It was a question. I breathed, in slow, out slow. I kept my hands open at my sides. I kept my feet where they were. The beast circled left. Long arc unhurried, its eyes on me the entire time. I turned with it, not fast, just staying present. I did not take a step toward it. I did not take a step back. I let it move. I let it look. It circled back to center. It stopped. It charged again. This time I felt it in my chest before I saw it move, a bass shift in the air, a pressure change. My breath caught. My weight shifted and caught itself. I stayed. It pulled up close again, closer this time. My shoulder screamed in a way that had nothing to do with the new distance. I breathed through my teeth. I kept my hands open. I kept my feet where they were. It held there. I could see myself reflected in its pale eyes, small, still, hands open. I thought about my father, standing at the mine entrance on a morning that was going to become the worst morning, saying the one thing he always said when a thing was hard and needed doing anyway. I did not say it out loud. I did not need to. It lived somewhere under my ribs, and it always had. The beast stepped back. Its head went down, low, slow, the way a bow is performed by something that has the weight of centuries behind it, something that has been waiting to find the reason for the gesture. It held that position. I stood in the amber light of the proving chamber on Karath Station, and I looked at the bowed head of a thing 400 years older than the academy around it, a thing built by a dead empire for a war that was long over, and I understood what it had been looking for. Not strength, not aggression, not the ability to survive. It had been built for war, and what war costs, what it always costs, what no empire ever figures out until it is too late, is the willingness to absorb the worst of it without breaking. Not invincibility, the opposite. The willingness to stay when everything in you is screaming to go. The willingness to take the impact and keep standing and not stop being what you are. The beast had been built by people who never understood that. They had built it to find that, without knowing what they were looking for. And 400 years later it was still looking, and every cadet who ran or fought or tried to win was giving it an answer it already knew. I was not a different answer. I was the same answer, finally, for the second time in 400 years. I stood in that chamber with my burning shoulder and my open hands and my steady feet, and the beast held its bow, and outside I knew Vel was at the observation port, and I hoped she was writing it down because I was not going to explain it well later. The chamber held, the light held. Everything was very quiet. I exhaled. Well, I said to the bowed head of the oldest thing on Karath Station, that is a thing. Then I turned, and I walked to the door, and I left. Sarek was waiting outside the chamber door with a ration pack in each hand, and the expression of someone who had been standing there long enough to be concerned, but was constitutionally opposed to showing it. He looked at my shoulder, he looked at my face, he looked back at my shoulder. "You are injured," he said. "It clipped me on the first pass," I said. "I think it was testing my reaction." "And your reaction was to stay?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. He held out the ration pack, the coffee one. It was warm, which meant he had planned ahead, which meant he had known I was going to walk out of there on my own feet, and something about that hit me behind the sternum in a way that I was going to think about later in private. I took it, I drank it, it was still terrible. "It bowed," he said. "It was not a question." "Yes." His plating made the low settling sound. He nodded once slowly, the way someone nods when they have been carrying a question for a long time and have finally put it down. Vel appeared from the observation corridor at a pace that was technically not running, but was working very hard not to be. She stopped in front of me. Her 4 eyes were all forward, all focused, which I had learned meant she was feeling something strongly and organizing it carefully. "I saw," she said. "I know." "4 hours," she said. "You were in there for 4 hours." I had not known that. It felt shorter, I said honestly. Vel looked at Sorek. Sorek looked at Vel. Something passed between them that did not require standard. "There will be a debrief," Vel said. "The Academy will want to know." "I know. They will send it through the station board. Tonight probably, certainly by morning." "I know that too." She studied me. "What will you tell them?" I drank the rest of my terrible coffee. I thought about the bowed head and the pale eyes and the amber light, and the question that had been waiting 400 years for someone to answer it correctly. And I thought about what happens when you take a living thing's truth and put it in a report. "The part they need to hear," I said, "not all of it." She nodded as if that was exactly what she had expected. The debrief was in the Academy's senior briefing room on the command level, which I had never been to before, and which was the kind of room that had been designed to make whoever sat across the table from the people running it feel small. High ceiling, long table, chairs on one side that were clearly meant for the people in charge, and chairs on the other side that were clearly meant for everyone else. I sat in an everyone else chair. My shoulder had been checked by the station medic, bruised, nothing structural, nothing that would cause lasting problem, and I had changed into a clean uniform and tied my hair back and looked in the mirror in the barracks and thought, "You look like exactly what you are." That seemed like the right condition for a debrief. There were 7 of them across the table. 4 were Academy brass species I recognized from the orientation briefing, ranks I had since learned. 2 were xenobiologists in research uniforms. The 7th was a Vreth officer, older than Sarek by what I estimated was several decades, with commendation marks running the full length of his upper plating. He had the kind of presence that rooms rearrange themselves around. They had the observation port recordings. They had the sensor logs from inside the chamber. They had, apparently, already been in contact with 2 off-station research institutions that had dispatched people on the first available transport when the station board flagged what had happened. The senior Academy officer, a species called Marin, blue-gray, with a voice like a formal document reading itself aloud, opened the debrief with 3 words. "Explain what happened." I looked at the 7 of them. I thought about the fragment from the unnamed Varath researcher. I thought about the sealed record. I thought about all the ways you can take something true and file it away under anomalous and move on. "I went into the proving chamber," I said. "The beast made 2 approach runs. I did not move or respond aggressively to either one. After the second run, it displayed the behavior you have in your sensor logs. I then left the chamber." Silence. The senior officer leaned forward. "That is a description of events. It is not an explanation." "I know," I said. "Those are different things." One of the xenobiologists, young, eager, already had a recording device out, said, "Did you use any technique? Any specific vocalization, posture training, chemical signal?" "No." "Were you aware of prior documentation regarding the bowing behavior?" A small pause. "I was aware there was a prior record." "How did you access that record?" "The archive index for that filing tier requires clearance above cadet level." I looked at her. "I found the maintenance terminal," I said. "The secondary network access. It was not difficult." She looked at the senior officer. He looked at me. Something moved in his expression that might have been frustration and might have been, under several layers of its more presentable cousins, something closer to respect. "Cadet Voss," the senior officer said, "you have done something that has not been done in this academy in over 400 years, setting aside one unverified anomalous record. The institutions represented in this room have significant interest in understanding the mechanism by which you achieved it. You will understand that we require more than a description of events." "I understand that," I said. I also understand that what happened in that chamber is not a technique. I let that sit for a moment. I watched it land differently on each of the 7 faces across from me. If I give you a technique, you will train cadets to perform the technique. You will build a curriculum around it. You will test for it. And then the beast will test your curriculum and it will find what it always finds. And what does it always find? The elder Vreth officer asked. His voice was low and very still. He had not spoken until now. I looked at him directly. An answer to a question you did not actually ask, I said. Long silence. Then what, he said, is the question? I thought about my father, about the mine, about the morning that became the worst morning and what he had said before it did, what he always said, what lived under my ribs and did not need to be spoken to be present. It wanted to know if I would stay, I said, so I stayed. The elder Vreth officer looked at me for a long time. His plating was absolutely still, which I had learned meant something in Vreth, not relaxation but a different kind of attention, the kind you give to things that matter. That is not a satisfying answer to the institutions in this room, he said. I know. It is not replicable. It is not teachable. It is not measurable by any standard in our curriculum. I know that too. He was quiet for a moment longer. And yet, he said very slowly, it is the only answer that has ever worked. Yes, I said. That is usually how it goes with the right answer to the wrong test. The room was very quiet after that. The senior officer attempted 3 more follow-up questions. The xenobiologists attempted 2. I answered all of them honestly and none of them fully, which is different from lying, and is something my father had also taught me, not in words but in the way he had lived. Near the end, they offered me a commendation, a formal designation. The elder Vreth officer read the Vreth word for it, which translated into standard as something close to, one who stands outside pattern, an exception, a thing the system had not accounted for. I looked at the paper they slid across the table. I pushed it back. Not dramatically. I was not trying to make a point. I was just being honest. I am not the exception, I said. You have been running the wrong test for 400 years. What that means is you have been getting the wrong answers for 400 years. That is a structural problem, not a me problem. The senior officer stared at me. What, he said, would the right test be? I stood up, my shoulder pulled, I breathed through it. I do not know, I said, but I know what it is not, and that is a start. I thanked them for their time, which I could see surprised all 7 of them, and I left. Back in Barracks 7, the evening cycle was running. The lights were at half. The station made its sounds. Pell was doing something in the corner that involved careful, repetitive movement and low humming. The others were at various stages of their evenings. Sarek was on his bunk. He did not look up when I came in. I sat on mine. I checked the latch out of habit. It held. For a long time, neither of us said anything. That was okay. We had gotten good at the quiet. It was, I had decided, the best kind of language, the kind where you do not have to spend anything to say what matters. What did they ask? He said eventually. Everything. What did you tell them? The part they needed to hear. He was quiet for a moment, and the rest. I looked at my palm. The word was gone now, fully gone, washed out over 24 days of work in cold floors and water from the station tap. There was nothing left to read, just skin. I did not need it anymore. The rest, I said, is just something you know or you do not know, and if you do not know it, no one can tell it to you. You have to find it somewhere inside you, and then you have to decide whether to trust it. Sarek turned his head toward me in the half-light. His pale eyes caught the low glow of the station cycle. He looked at me for a long time, the same way he had looked at me on the first day, when he had told me about the 400 years, when I had smiled without knowing I was doing it. Humans, he said. Yes, I said. You are a very difficult species to understand. Most things worth understanding are. He made the low settling sound. He turned back toward the ceiling. Pell kept humming in the corner. The station kept breathing. I lay back on my bunk. I looked at the ceiling that hummed like it was thinking about something private. I thought about the chamber and the amber light and the thing that had waited 400 years for an honest answer. I thought about the paper I had pushed back across the table. I thought about my father and the mine and the word I had written on my palm that I did not need to write again. I thought about what it means to stay. Not to win, not to dominate, not to be the exception that breaks the pattern. Just to stay, breathing, open-handed, present. To be so completely and entirely what you are that there is nothing left to test. That was the thing the Varath had built their beast to find and never could name. That was the thing the Academy had filed under Anomalous for 400 years. That was the thing that every curriculum and commendation and designation in every briefing room on every station in this galaxy could not contain in a document. It did not have a better name than the one it had always had. It was just the oldest, plainest, most difficult thing there was. And it was the most human thing I knew. The station hummed. I closed my eyes. I slept.